The dreamlike land of Termina, accessible through a mystical forest. 20 years later, and the verity of this plane of existence is still questioned. Something Link simply dreamt? A parallel world to Hyrule? Or just another alternate reality in a string of many? What's up, guys? It's Edible Incredible, and to celebrate its 20th birthday this April, I'll be looking back at the original release of Majora's Mask. And to do so, let's cover gameplay, including the 4 dungeons, side quests, and the 3D mechanic, story, and how it naturally develops the characters, the overworld and its unique use of distinct regions, and the everlasting musical pieces that this game created. But first of all, let's touch on its history. So as we know, Majora's Mask is a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time. But originally, it was only going to be an added quest to Ocarina, utilizing the N64 disk drive to craft an expansion for the game. At the time, Nintendo called this Year of Zelda. In 1999, Nintendo announced Zelda Gaiden, which was assumed to be the new working title for Year of Zelda. But this turned out not to be the case. Zelda Gaiden was a different project that would later be known as Majora's Mask. Zelda Yura was the beginning stages to a future bonus disc that was sold alongside the Wind Waker, which is now known as Master Quest. Just 17 months following the massive release of Ocarina, Majora's Mask exploded onto the shelves, the quickest turnaround between any 2 main series Zelda games. In order to capitalize on such a ridiculous time frame, they decided to reuse a bunch of aesthetics, basically the same fundamental gameplay as Ocarina, but with some new features that really spiced things up. One specifically was the famous 3D mechanic, which either makes or breaks the game, depending on the opinion. In my belief, it's the key component that really brings this mysterious plane of existence to life. We wouldn't have the feeling of a living, breathing schedule for all these NPCs. Sure, it forces us to complete the dungeons in a timely fashion, but this only increases the sense of urgency that Termina's all about. It makes way for the most thought-out side quest the series has ever seen. This is the reason to play Majora's Mask. It's one of the only Zeldas where the dungeons aren't the main attraction, alongside Breath of the Wild and some could say the Wind Waker as well, with its glorious Great Sea. But Majora really capitalizes on its strange way of doing things. 4 dungeons for a Zelda game is simply unheard of, other than the New Age Breath of the Wild, of course. But back in 2000, Zelda fans were accustomed to the bulk of their time being spent in dungeons. Majora showcased how a Zelda can thrive in seemingly bizarre scenarios. From saving ranch girls from moo-seeking aliens, to helping a postman that's so addicted to his work that he needs reassurance from others whether or not he should flee. These side quests are so unorthodox, yet they convey the tragic side of human emotion beautifully. Just look at the despair Anju and Cafe put themselves through. They both accept that they won't see each other again, waiting out the end by hoping the other felt the same way. It's tragedy displayed via video game in its finest form. Of course, without the Hero of Time's aid, they never would have been able to marry, let alone see each other again. This is also the only Zelda tale that pits you against the odds. Termina's fated to fall. It's up to Link to change his course of history. Usually, he's just fulfilling a role that was laid out before his quest even began. Skyward Sword is a great example of this. It's believed that the goddess Hylia set up these trials to test Link, ensuring that the spirit of the hero was capable to resolve future conflicts. So now, let's dive into each of the game's regions chronologically, starting with the land of Woodfall, home to the Deku Palace. My favorite thing about this region is by far the Deku Palace theme. The first dungeon and the lead up to it doesn't feel like anything special, but I do enjoy fighting the boss, at least in the first release. The whole eyeball mechanic in the 3DS version feels so unoriginal, especially for the Zelda series. Snowhead, on the other hand, is my second favorite region. I love the whole idea of putting Darmani's soul at ease by taking his place physically. rolling around and punching the shit out of things is just epic. And the drastic difference visually between Snowhead being covered by harsh snow and the beauty that spring brings once you defeat God is the most eminent transition of any of the game's regions. The dungeon itself isn't the best this game has to offer, but it's one of the greatest second dungeons I've ever experienced. It can be a tad confusing, but I love how it's set up, forcing the player to constantly break layers of ice to reach the top, where we meet a boss that isn't too tough, but is probably the most enjoyable fight throughout the whole game, utilizing that Goron roll super effectively. Oh, and this region is home to the famous Gilded Sword. The Goron race will probably take you multiple attempts unless you're a beast, but finally receiving the blade is pretty damn satisfying. Next, let's touch on Great Bay. It's the area I have the most mixed feelings for. Aesthetically, it's awesome, but it's usually the place I look forward to the least, mainly due to its dungeon. Honestly, it's my least favorite water dungeon. But then again, it's the water dungeon I'm least familiar with. I'm sure if I got more used to it, it'd at least grow on me a little bit. The Water Temple, on the other hand, I've played countless times, so naturally it's gonna be my favorite. Although in Great Bay Temple, the boss's art strength. The frog mid-boss, even though he's pretty derpy, is quite enjoyable, and Georg is a nice challenge to end off this maze of a dungeon. And not to mention the eyeball boss. I sorta have a thing for huge eyeball bosses in Zelda games. It reminds me of a sorcerer. And finally, it's time for the absolute coolest area in this game, Ikana Canyon. I love dreary locations in Zeldas, and Ikana stands atop all the others. The Shadow Temple is right up there too. These abandoned sites ooze with regretful undead. It's a little bit of a pain to collect all the random junk the Redeads long for beneath the well, but the atmosphere is top notch. Same goes for the region's mini dungeon. It's not the hardest mini dungeon, but it sure does reek with that oh so juicy gloom. The boss is hot too, especially if you're able to roast him on his own throne. He fell on his own throne. That's too far. Oh, it got him. He's already dead? It's like 2 hits and it knocked him out. Wow, okay. Right in his own throne, perfect. Stone Tower Temple is this region's finale, and man, does it deliver. It's not the final dungeon per se, there's a potential semi-dungeon on the moon, but either way, Stone Tower is up there with the pinnacle of Zelda dungeons. It's fairly confusing, but not enough to rip your brain out, and the mid-bosses here are once again super cool. Overall, Majora's Mask has some of the best mid-bosses in my belief, other than the friggin' Wizrubs. They super lame. But my favorite mid-boss in Stone Tower is easily the Batman, or thing, known as Gomes. This dude is just sick. Not really fight-wise, as it's nothing too special, but his design alone is what sells it. And now it's time for the boss of this dungeon. It's also one of my favorites, Twin Mode. I totally love the sense of scope. Initially, it reminds me of Shadow of the Colossus. That is, of course, until you slap on that giant's mask. To whoop that eye. Slamming Twin Mode down is so fun. Specifically, this boss and Georg are actually improved upon in the 3DS version. Georg with its added second phase that forces you to go underwater, and the whole spinning Twin Mode around wasn't in the original at all. The mystery behind the entirety of Stone Tower is so intriguing. From the oddly placed Triforce symbols that were taken out for the 3DS version, to being able to flip the whole thing vertically. It's one of those specific Zelda structures that will always be theorized upon forever. And finally, good old Clock Town. It's the most well-crafted Zelda town. I've never got to experience such a living, breathing village that functions so methodically. It's the first thing that comes to mind when referencing this game. It's home to one of the best, if not the best, town themes. Speaking of music, this game truly hits home in regard to the overall musical score. The Wind Waker relies on lighthearted and upbeat pieces to flesh out its gorgeous Great Sea. Twilight Princess uses gloomy themes to make the player feel hopeless at times. But Majora's Mask does both in a way that constantly reminds you of the impending doom. The Clocktown theme is a fabulous example of this. Day 3 is so upbeat and gives a sense of ever-increasing pressure to fulfill whatever it is you're trying to complete before you return to the first day. Same goes for the Final Hours theme, but to a whole nother level. Without these erratic and straight-up bone-chilling themes, Majora's Mask wouldn't be as sketched into our psyches as much as it is for many Zelda fans. Musical scores in general give an added layer of depth to anything. Just try playing the final hours with your TV muted. It'll never be as impactful. The same applies for any kind of media. The background themes will always drive forward whatever the creators are trying to make you feel. Sometimes it'll feel too forced, but sometimes, like in Majora's Mask, it's executed to near perfection. If you listen closely, the 4 region themes actually have the same rhythmic tone. Such a cool Easter egg I didn't ever realize until applying background music for this video. Now it may seem like I absolutely adore this game, and I do. It's one of my favorite Zeldas, purely by its ability to be so unique. But a couple things hold it back from being my favorite. The side quests and its coinciding NPCs scattered so naturally across its world are most definitely its strong suit, as well as its story and how it draws out very true to life emotional reactions by these side characters. It's an overarching tragic feeling that just hovers over these characters. The negatives of this game stem from the main quest. I welcome the idea of branching the overworld into 4 sections with each of its respected dungeons, but some of the lead-ups to these dungeons aren't the best the series has seen, with a massive exception to Ikana and Snowhead. Woodfall and Great Bay just aren't that enjoyable to trek through. They both have their moments, like sneaking around the Pirate Fortress and Deku Palace is pretty enjoyable, especially with those themes. But searching for Zora eggs and going on the boat cruise just isn't that fun in my opinion. So something I totally avoided in this retrospective is the ending. I recently did a top 5 Zelda endings including Majora's Mask, so I'll just say it's such a ridiculous finale, and in a pretty great way. But I will quickly touch on the game's intro to end things off. Link in search of Navi as he depressingly wanders the Lost Woods. I love how the end to Ocarina directly affects the tale of Majora. Without Navi's departure, Link never would have ended up in Termina. On a cool side note, Skullkid in the beginning remembers Link. In the opposite branch of history, you're actually able to kill Skullkid in the Lost Woods as adult Link. In the child timeline, as young Link in Ocarina, you can't, which is of course where this game takes place. It's funny that they thought enough ahead to make this reality canon. Unless you decide to glitch the game with the friggin' Deku Stick. Overall, Majora's Mask was quite similar to Ocarina in terms of gameplay and graphics, yet was still able to create such an interesting new world that really twisted what a Zelda could be. Since they were able to do this in such a short time frame, it gives me hope that Breath of the Wild 2 could do the same, by using the established groundwork to produce something that's just as incredible as Majora was to Ocarina. That being said, I really appreciate you watching this long. Now that my college classes are strictly online, I should finally be able to start cranking out some content for you awesome people. And until then, I hope you all stay hyped. Peace!